Hey everybody, how are you doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and today, can you believe it? We actually get to talk about E3 in 2021 and Nintendo playing a pretty big part of the show. So this was very big and very exciting news that we were all treated to this week when the ESA officially confirmed that E3 is returning after taking last year off, of course, due to the pandemic and everything happening around that whole crazy situation. And at that time, a lot of people were maybe ready to put the nail in the coffin, so to speak, when it comes to E3. A lot of people were writing it off, saying that the show was already on its way out. Now that it's canceled because of the pandemic, this is the time to finally see it just die and go away. Most people thought that they weren't going to be able to recover. I never really thought that, and now we have proof of that because it is returning, and there are so many great companies playing a part, like I said, including Nintendo as well as Microsoft. And so now, what can we actually expect from the show? Of course, before we dive too much deeper into the E3 2021 topic, I do want to remind you that I'm always trying to grow the channel here. I upload and post several videos every single week, covering all things Nintendo and Metroid and all things gaming. So, as you watch this video, if you seem to like what I'm doing and what you hear, then hopefully you will consider subscribing to the channel. So what's really weird and kind of kooky about the way this information rolled out this week about E3 2021 was this kind of back and forth that existed online for about maybe 2 hours, where it seemed like maybe E3 and the ESA who puts on E3 was planning to make it some kind of a paid virtual event. They are still doing it virtual. Obviously, with E3 returning, we're still a little bit in the scenario where the pandemic is a bit scary. So it is happening virtually. It's not in person in Los Angeles, but there was that period where it seemed like they were going to be charging people to have access to certain things, maybe some video content or presentation content, perhaps even some game demos that you would be able to pay to have access to, stuff like that. And like I said, about 2 hours that did the rounds, and people were really not happy with it. But eventually, they came out and they cleared things up, and they assured everyone that that is not what's happening. It is not a paid event. It is a free event, virtual, just like most shows. We're not paying to actually watch it from home on the internet. And like I said, tons of great companies involved. A couple of quick snippets from the E3 official site read as this. It's game on for E3 as the Entertainment Software Association officially unveils plans for a reimagined all-virtual E3 2021 that will engage video game fans everywhere, with early commitments from Nintendo, Xbox, Capcom, Konami, Ubisoft, Take-Two Interactive, Warner Brothers Games, Koch Media, I'm not sure or familiar with that, but those guys, and then of course more to come. E3 2021 will take place June 12th through June 15th. For more than 2 decades, E3 has been the premier venue to showcase the best that the video game industry has to offer while uniting the world through games, said Stanley Pierre-Louis, president and CEO of the ESA. We are evolving this year's E3 into a more inclusive event, but will still look to excite the fans with major reveals and insider opportunities that make this event the indispensable center stage for video games. So to me, that all sounds pretty good, man. I mean, I've tweeted about this a little bit this week since this news came out. I know that over the past couple of years, a lot of people have grown more and more cynical around E3 and whether or not it's relevant and if it can survive, and some people just honestly almost acting like they hate it and they just want it to die. It's like people just like standing at the grave waiting for E3 to be thrown into the ground. And, you know, I mean, that's not me. Like, I like E3. I get that the relevance has been changing and shifting, and obviously things aren't the same now as they were even 5 or 10 years ago when E3 was really at its best. But I still like it, and I have no reason to want it to go away, and I even still think that there's a ton of value to it. Yes, in the internet age, it's like doing an in-person convention like this makes less and less sense. I get that argument, and there is a ton of truth to it. I'm not trying to deny that, especially as somebody who, with the exception of one time, has only ever watched E3 from afar from the comfort of my home. I did attend in 2004, the golden age of E3, and the golden age of gaming, really. And that was fantastic, but outside of that, I'm just like you guys, I'm watching from home, and so I just want E3 to continue, and I really love seeing that they've managed to find a way to come back, do it virtually, and they even have a ton of major, huge, very important companies involved. Of course, it needs to be noted that, again, Sony is a no-show. So far, they are electing not to be a part of E3. and I discussed this on my live stream the other day. It's very frustrating to me. I think it's really not the smartest move, but it is what it is. You know, maybe they have a long-term plan that's going to make sense. You know, in 2013, when Nintendo first elected to stop doing press conferences of all things, which was like a world-shattering decision, it was very confusing to a lot of us, and at the time, it was something that none of us liked, and we all wanted them to keep doing the same thing. But as time went on, we saw what their plan is. They've now perfected their plan and their presence at E3, and we're fine with it. We're happy with it, and we get excited for it. Maybe Sony plans to replace their E3 presence and PlayStation Experience, which has been canceled, and do something else, and so we're just going to have to wait and see how that all plays out. For me, seeing Capcom, Konami, Ubisoft, Warner Brothers, and of course Microsoft is huge news. Those are the kinds of companies that you need involved with your E3 experience to make it feel legitimate, important, valuable, and like something people needs to pay attention to. That helps keep E3 important. And then of course, right alongside that is Nintendo, which we're pretty much going to focus on today. It's mostly what I focus on with the channel. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to undersell the fact that Microsoft is going to be there. Having 2 of the 3 console players at E3 means E3 is still firing on close to all cylinders, despite having to be virtual. But with Nintendo showing up, I mean, this gets really exciting. Even Doug Bowser referenced it in a tweet. We haven't seen anyone from Nintendo, and even Doug Bowser, do or say anything important or acknowledge anything that they're doing over the past 2 years. And suddenly Doug Bowser comes out and sends a tweet about how happy he is to be involved with E3 again. It's a pretty big deal, and it means we might be getting set up for a really strong showing. Now, I really don't want to turn this video into like an E3 predictions video. I think it's way too early to do that. We have to get closer to the show. We have to wait to see how the next couple of weeks and months pan out before E3 actually happens, because who knows what we might actually see or understand about anything Nintendo, Microsoft, or any of these companies are doing. We might even get another Nintendo Direct between now and then. I actually think that's not a crazy thought. Is it super likely? Probably not, but I do think there's a little bit of a possibility, and so everything could change between now and June 12th, the first day of this year's E3. But I do want to make a bit of a case in this video as to why I think that this could kind of be Nintendo's E3 to win. I think they are the ones really poised to make the strongest showing. Yes, Microsoft as well, because they have a brand new Xbox Series X to support. Maybe they're finally going to dump a bunch of games that show us why the library of the Series X is going to be stronger and stronger. They're probably going to feature Halo Infinite pretty heavily, which will be very exciting and huge news. But I still think Nintendo, not because I'm like a Nintendo fan. I'm not trying to take the fanboy bias perspective. I truly objectively think that Nintendo are the ones that could steal this show. I mean, in terms of games, there are 2 massive ones that could make a huge dent in Nintendo's E3 presence. And it's pretty obvious what they are. One is Breath of the Wild 2, which I think has a great chance at being heavily featured at E3, if not basically a lock. The other, in no surprise to any of you, is Metroid Prime 4. And I know that Metroid Prime 4 presents a weird situation for a lot of people because many people think the game is still 1,000 years off, or that Nintendo doesn't care about Metroid and the game is dead and we're never going to see it and yada yada yada. I've addressed those things, and while I don't think the game is anywhere near ready to release, it's obviously not coming out this year, I agree with that. You've heard me state it ever since my first video of 2021, where I said, you guys, I absolutely think we're going to see and hear from the Metroid franchise in 2021, and I think there is a great chance, I'm saying about a 75 to 80% chance, that we see a teaser or trailer for Metroid Prime 4 in 2021. And now, and remember, I made that prediction before we knew E3 was coming back. Now that E3 is coming back, I'm only going to double down on my prediction about a Metroid Prime 4 trailer. And I think that if it is going to happen, if my prediction is true, it seems pretty likely that E3 is going to be the ideal place for Nintendo to do it. So I think that Breath of the Wild 2 and Metroid Prime 4 have a great chance at showing up at their E3 show in June. And if so, it's going to be 2 of the biggest titles featured across the entire show. Of course, another big thing that we've been following this year in the world of Nintendo is the ever-present Nintendo Switch Pro, or Super Switch. It seems like with the recent Bloomberg rumors, suddenly people have decided to abandon the Switch Pro name for this made-up rumor device, and now everyone is moving on to Super Switch. I guess we're supposed to call it the Super Switch now. I mean, I don't know. I don't really care what we call it, because right now the thing is still a mystery, and we don't even know if it's real. I do tend to believe it's real, but since we don't know anything, like, Switch Pro makes just as much sense to me as anything else, and if anything, I know when I say Switch Pro, you guys all know what I'm talking about. And so, with all of this movement and conversation and rumors about a Switch Pro and the fact that it probably would be coming out this year, and is it a small upgrade, is it a huge upgrade, is it a next-gen caliber kind of upgrade, whichever one of those three boxes it's going to fit into, is there a chance that it would show up at E3? And of course, I mean, the answer is yes. You know, showing hardware at E3 conventions is definitely a staple for the show, and Nintendo themselves has even done it, both for the Wii, you know, back in the Revolution days, they did it for the Wii, and they did it for the Wii U. So maybe the Switch Pro, or the Super Switch, or the next-gen Switch, whatever it is, Switch 2, I think that if it's real, there is a great chance that it shows up at this show. And so right off the bat, just those three things alone, if we get the unveiling of new Switch hardware, we get a blowout on Breath of the Wild 2, and we get anything about Metroid Prime 4, no matter how small or insignificant, if we get those three things, that alone is going to be massive headlines for Nintendo at E3. It'll be good for E3 because headlines like that keep E3 relevant, but it's also going to be good for Nintendo. And those things alone could probably steal the show. But we have to remember, on top of those three things, if all three of them were to happen, there's still room for plenty of other things from Nintendo to still surprise us, to basically add on top of the hype and the headlines of those three releases. Bayonetta 3 has to show up at the show, and now is going to be time for them to start revealing other new surprise games, like the next Mario game, a new Fire Emblem title, maybe a new Mario Kart. Everyone's been waiting for Mario Kart 9. I mean, things like that could also show up. A crazy surprise game, like a new F-Zero or Pikmin 4. If any one of these things start happening alongside of a Metroid, Zelda, and a Switch Pro kind of thing, I mean, I don't know, man. Again, yes, I'm a Nintendo fan, but I start to think, as I pile these things up in my brain as things that could happen during E3 this year, I feel like that gives Nintendo a chance at having the strongest show. And considering it's the first E3 in 2 years, you've got Capcom, Konami, Ubisoft, and Microsoft showing up, and they're going to be able to unveil all the Bethesda stuff in the world. It really becomes exciting to think that Nintendo might still be the company poised to kind of sweep the whole show with the biggest announcements. I think it's important to note, something that I said on my last live stream as well, is that Nintendo has also kind of been preparing for a virtual E3 for 8 years. Because it was back in 2013 when they made that decision that I referenced earlier to leave the convention stage and elect to just do basically a Nintendo Direct, a normal old Nintendo Direct, except specific to E3. And they've done that every year since. There's been some really great highs and a couple of really low lows, but there's always a chance that they come out swinging with a great Nintendo Direct specifically made for E3. They've already figured out how to deliver digital presentation content to the gamer and the Nintendo fan, both with regular Nintendo Directs and with E3 Directs. Now that it's all virtual, Nintendo doesn't actually have to change anything about what they would have done for E3 this year. You know, I mean, really think about that. Every other company, Xbox, Ubisoft, Capcom, all these companies, Warner Brothers, they have to adapt. They have to find a way to make, you know, presenting their new products interesting and entertaining without the help of the E3 stage, you know, or being a part of some other conference. They've all got to do it on their own digitally, and I'm sure they're going to be able to do it. It's going to be fine. But again, Nintendo has already perfected this format. They perfected it 7 or 8 years ago. And so that just makes me so excited, like I've already said, to see what they're going to do. On top of the fact that I am excited for Microsoft. I am excited for Capcom. I am praying to the heavens Konami is going to show us a new Silent Hill. Please, for the love of God, give us Silent Hill. And I can't wait to see what Ubisoft is doing. Maybe they show off the Star Wars game that they started working on. This is a really great time, you guys. This is something to be excited for. I know a lot of you guys might hate on E3 nowadays and you don't care anymore, but I still do, and a lot of other people still do. So maybe this is the time to see E3 come back stronger than ever and really cement itself as something that isn't going anywhere. So these are just my thoughts about E3 returning and Nintendo's presence at E3 for now. like I already said, things will probably change and evolve over the next coming weeks, and as we kind of see everything come into focus and we understand what could be happening, I'll probably make an update video or two at the time that it makes sense to do it, about what we might actually see and what's going on and what we can expect. And then, of course, I'll probably do an actual predictions video like a couple of days before E3 begins. So either way, this is just very exciting. I'm thrilled about E3. I'm thrilled seeing Nintendo and Microsoft play a part in it. You've heard me talk about it. What do you think? What do you expect? Are you excited? Are you not excited? Talk about all that stuff below. And with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of 2 Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.